Good evening, Ed. Tom, I think we have a quorum, so if you can start the recording, let me know. We'll go ahead and get started.
All right, YouTube's good, Zoom is good.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to the April 1st regular meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Madam Clerk, may I have you call a roll, please?
Mayor Rilling,
Present.
Mr. Abrams,
Here.
Mr. Camacho,
I'm here.
Mr. Constant,
Here.
Mr. Gilleret,
Present.
Ms. Cassinis, Mr.
Here.
Cassinis, I apologize. Ms. Yang,
Here.
7, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. A few housekeeping issues before I turn it over to the mayor for opening remarks. Number one, I will remind people there is no public comment on a Board of Estimate and Tax regular meeting. Any and all of the comments received throughout today will be added to the minutes of the meeting, and any additional written comments will be added as appropriate. Second thing before I turn it to the mayor is I would like to make a motion to modify our agenda this evening, specifically to move the additional information section and the presentations of the tax collector and Oak Hills Park specifically to precede section C, other business. This way we can allow our invited guests to make the remarks and move on after that to the more lengthy discussion around the operating budget. May I get a second to that motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much. We'll move the additional information to follow the transfer agenda then. Mr. Mayor, with that done, I'd like to turn it to you for opening remarks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Abrams. I know that after all this, we'll be presenting our recommended budget and taking a vote on it. So if you would indulge me, I will make the comments just before that section of the agenda.
Very good. All right, with that then, our first item on the agenda is approval of a variety of minutes, our regular meeting from February 12th, and then all of our special meetings to review budget and through March 4th, March 6th, 7th, 11th, 13th, and 18th. Can I get somebody to please move the review and approval of those minutes?
So moved. Just Troy.
Thank you, Troy. Any changes, revisions, comments, corrections to any of the minutes as presented in our package? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes as provided, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The minutes are approved. Tom, I will go ahead to transfer items. I believe there's 2 transfers on our agenda tonight on page 42 of our package. But Tom, do you want to take us through those? 43 of the package, excuse me.
Yeah, sure. Just 2 items tonight, none of them contingency related. Both of them from the police department, a couple different things that they want to do here, one for 16,000 and another for 32,000. I saw Mickey Dosmo on here earlier, and hopefully he still is. Mickey, you online?
I'm on, Tom. I'll just make a couple general comments and then I'll take questions. This is the beginning of our annual transfer process to reprioritize funds to critical initiatives. There's been just some spending holdbacks in order to accomplish 2 things. The first thing is the range. The range was cleaned in 2019 and regular maintenance standards require that we do that after about 85,000 rounds in each lane. We think we're up around 100. I won't get into too much of the details, but it's gotten to the point where it's a little bit dangerous. There could be ricochets. So that's what the range transfer is for, in order to mine and dispose of the lead. The other transfer is for ballistic helmets. Ballistic helmets, I guess they're kind of like car seats. They have like a lifespan. They don't fall apart, but they're not supposed to be safe after 5 to 7 years. This is for the required replacement of those helmets. Both of these items, if approved by the board, will be accomplished in the next month.
Thank
the
you, Mickey,
long-
and I apologize, Mickey. Clerical error on my part. I forgot to move the transferred items for discussion and approval. Can I get those moved, please? Thank you, Artie. Thank you, Mickey. One quick question for me as it relates to the helmets. How many units are we talking about? Just out of curiosity.
You know, I'm not exactly sure. I think the deputy chief is on. Deputy Chief Lepore is on. She may know. If not, I will find out and get right back to you.
Okay. Deputy Chief, you're on mute, I believe. Well, we agreed no April Fool's jokes on this meeting. Technology's not supporting us in that regard.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so the helmets are for our ESU team, and I believe there's 30 helmets.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions related to these transfers from others? Seeing none, all in favor of the transfers as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The transfers are approved.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you, Mr.
much,
Abrams.
Chief, Deputy Chief.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you
Moving
very
next.
much.
Yep. Moving next then, Tom, to other business. Excuse me, not other business, the additional information. I forget whether it's Lisa's turn in the rotation to go first or Alan's turn in the rotation to go first. So I'll defer to you on that, Tom.
Yes, Lisa is listed first.
Okay. Good evening, Lisa.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Terrific. Thank you. We have our reports. I'm going to review the report through the end of February only because we still don't have our end of March numbers finalized yet, but through the end of February, we were at 96.94% of our current levy, which is where we need to be through the end of the month of February. Since that narrative was written in the middle of March, we've continued working on delinquent enforcement, in particular with regard to mailing of delinquent notices, demand notices, and also work on our tax sale, which is scheduled for September 9th. Through the middle of March, we had collected already nearly $1.6 million on our tax sale. We were up to 171 properties. That number will likely expand because we're going to review our spreadsheets again and try to include some more properties in the sale, again, with the goal of meeting the revenue projections that you have in mind for the coming fiscal year, for fiscal year end June 2025. I'll have more information for you next month. I'll need to come before you at that time in order to have you review and potentially approve our transfer to suspense, our annual suspense transfer, and also to continue to answer your questions relative to the sale and to current collections. But things are where they need to be for us at this time. We're probably going to file our lien continuing certificates later this week. I'm actually working on that now. The last day to pay was the end of March, but we did have the holiday in there. Good Friday, the building was closed, offices were closed. So we're taking a couple more days to wrap things up. But the tax collector's office and our revenue for fiscal year end 2024 is where it needs to be, to the best of my understanding at this time. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Lisa, questions for Lisa? thank you as always, Lisa, for the work that you and your team continually do on behalf of the city. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now we move to Alan, Tom.
Mr.
Tom, you're
Chairman.
muted.
Yep, Alan, there he is.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the accommodation and moving me up. I do appreciate it. We're now in the 8th month of our operating the budget in the month of February. January, February, 2 quiet months for us at Oak Hills. Just from an operating point of view, in the month of February, our revenue is down by about $20,000 compared to our budget. Mainly a lot was weather related, and some was the pace of the pickup of the ID cards. But I think we'll catch up on that as we go into March. We're already in March and April, so I'm not too concerned about that. Basically, revenue is doing okay. We're still $58,000 over budget after 8 months, so we're okay. We did get a bit back in the month of February. On the expense side, we did spend $15,000 more than our budget in the month of February. A lot of that was to do with getting the restaurant geared up and ready, getting all the vendors in to look at the Ansel system and all the, the systems that have the kitchen systems, the refrigeration, and getting that up to speed so we can get the kitchens open for our new restaurant operator. Year to date, our expenses are $30,000 higher than budget. So if you had the $58,000 over in revenue, $30,000 higher in expenses, was still $28,000 ahead profit-wise after our 8 months. So still okay, but just January, February didn't make budget. It's not all roses. We have to just be a little careful as well with our spending. Any questions on the finance part for the month of February?
Nope.
Just one quick thing. Obviously, we are now gearing up to open our restaurant. O'Dean's is our new restaurant operator. That's now public knowledge, obviously. They're at Ridgefield. They have the municipal golf course there. They do a good job. We're working with them. They've met with the Men's Golf Association a couple of nights ago, Women's Golf Association. We opened the halfway house up today, I believe. And we are working diligently to get the restaurant open. I think we're serving breakfast this week. And then we'll be opening the restaurant 1, 2, 3 weeks as soon as we can get everything. And the liquor license, we've got a couple of things to iron out with that. Our attorneys and their attorneys are working with the state of Connecticut just to iron that out. We don't have it in hand yet, but we anticipate we will within the next 1 to 2 weeks. So getting ready to open up, and we're pretty excited about that. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Alan. Questions for Alan?
I just want to say, Alan Troy, you did a great job with the transparency with the restaurant, and today was the opening day, and we look forward to it. Good job.
Thank you, Troy. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Alan. That will conclude the additional information section of our agenda. We'll now move into the other items or other business, section C of our agenda. I'd like to suggest, again, just in the spirit of keeping us moving through things, Tom, maybe we do the second 2 items first, the statement on contingency and the capital transmittal letter, and then we can really focus heavily on the operating budget.
Yes, I agree with that. Do you need to make a motion on that first or no?
For safety's sake, I will move that we discuss items 2 and 3 ahead of item 1 on other business. May I get a second, please? Thank you, Artie. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, abstentions. Thank you. We'll go ahead and discuss the transmittal letter and the contingency statement first.
Okay. Yeah, on the capital, I'm sorry, which one did you want to do first, Ed?
We can do the transmittal letter first, Tom.
Okay, yeah, so the transmittal letter is basically from the BET to the Common Council, just talking about what we ended up with as of the mayor's recommendations. And let me just pull it up here. And the amount, the total, hold on.
$1,217,280 for FY 24-25.
Right, and then there's, I believe 24 and a half of that is related to the enterprise funds, so the key number is 45 and change, I believe.
That is correct. 24,850 for enterprise funds, which is the Water Pollution Association and parking, and the remaining for the city and the Board of Education is 45,367,280.
Okay, so that is that 45 million is the key number. You probably heard talk over at least the last year, if not more, regarding keeping that number under 50 million. So with a fair amount of scrubbing and delaying projects, we are under by 5 million.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any questions or comments related to that as a capital cap and transmittal letter? Remember that it's kind of reversed for us with the Common Council on the capital budget versus the operating budget. We set the cap, they do the line item spent.
So what if this amount is bonded, what does that bring our total debt outstanding to?
Well, we don't really bond off of that. We bond off of our cash flows. We go out to the divisions and ask them on a quarterly basis, what are your expectations coming up over the next year? Well, actually, even further than that, several years, but we look at the next 12 months as a key indicator. So probably around when we get the numbers for the June 30th cash flow analysis, that will help us determine what we're going to require in terms of the annual bond offering in late July or August. So last year, I think it was 70 million. We are and have been coming up closely on the thresholds on that. So I think a large factor will be what the schools need. We see that Norwalk High has broken ground, so we may have to ask certain areas to delay some projects, but we really don't know until everybody gets their requests in on what they estimate over the next year to two.
So let's piece that out then. So what is the current debt outstanding?
I don't know offhand. Was in that sheet that I sent out that had the total. What's that?
I for one am uncomfortable talking about these capital expenditures outside of a presentation which shows our projected borrowings over the years going forward, and how that is going to impact our ratings. Since I really don't know how close we're going to come to it and how much we're going to need to bond in advance for the capital expenditures for the school projects.
May I make a comment?
Please.
Please.
If I recall, before last year's offering, well, after last year's August issuance of the 70 million, we had a total of $450 million outstanding, ballpark. And Bill Lindsay, our financial advisor, after doing analysis and the change in the Moody's rating formulas, said that we had a limit of about 500 million before the AAA would be in jeopardy. So the thought would be that this year's issuance should probably be about 50 million. Tom, is that what you recall that Bill had said?
Yes.
So about 50 million for this year. And as Tom said, we go by cash flows because of the IRS requirements and mandates that we spend down whatever we borrow within a very tight timeline of 2 to 3 years.
Okay. Additional questions or comments?
So after this July's bonding, we'll be close to 500 million. And so how much do we anticipate we'll be able to pay down through the cash flow and give us room for what borrowings we need for next year, and what is the amount of capital that we will need to fund prior to getting our reimbursement for the high school, because I understand the high school is going to cost 289 million roughly. And I think we have to fund that before we get our reimbursements. So I'm curious as to how that gets funded, and what the lag looks like, and whether or not, if we have to fund $100 million, does that put us up at 600? And what do the rating agencies say? I just don't know the answers to that, and I think before we honestly talk about this and approving this capital budget as well as this operating budget, we need to know what kind of cushion we need to prepare for so that we don't lose our AAA rating. If we decide as a board we want to lose our AAA rating and we're going to go to a higher cost of capital, that's fine. But like this commercial residential shift, I don't want to be here a year from now saying, oh my God, what are we doing? So I haven't seen that presentation, and I feel very uncomfortable passing this budget and even passing this capital appropriation, even though it's in line year after year, without knowing what that looks like.
Duly noted. Thank you, Ms. Yang. Any questions from any other BET members?
This is Troy. Yeah, I tend to echo that. I think you got to look at these things together. You really can't look at them separately, one off. Henry, how do you handle this? How will the city, the bonding agencies look at the fact that we are going to be taking all the money, although we're getting 80% of it back? How will it, because we are going to spike up. How do they look at that?
Well, the two key metrics for us that the bonding rating agencies look at is the absolute value of debt compared to our grant list and our revenues, et cetera.
Right.
And then the second is looking at the debt service costs, the principal and interest that have to be paid, and comparing that to expenses. So about 2 years ago, Bill Lindsay thought that 400 million was the limit. Moody's changed their analysis and they gave us credit explicitly for the very good 75% funding of pensions and 100% funding of OPEB, where we exceeded 95% of all the governments out there. So that's how he came to a $500 million limit. The last time I looked, the debt service ratio was at about 9.5%, and his analysis was that AAA Connecticut credits had no more than 10% debt service ratio to their expenses. So we're bumping up against both of those limits. And I would just remind everyone, it's not just the annual capital budget. There's historical capital projects that have been approved but not yet funded. So the reality, the only room we really have is that in our debt service every year, we're paying off some of the debt. So if you replace that debt with new debt, you're still at the same debt level, okay? But the needs and the requirements and the capital budgets are such that it didn't seem like that would be feasible. It's in the range of 20 to 25 million that gets paid down. And so I think the issue of the gross versus net on the borrowing, which you're asking about, and the state reimbursement, I think obviously that should be less risky than just borrowing without an expected inflow. However, they're going to look at that as, you owe us until you get the money, and the state tends to reimburse I think it was 89 or 90% along the way with a 10% holdback. Then at the end of the project, a year or two after the project is completed, they audit and they may make deductions and adjustments and say, let's say, for example, a swimming pool is not reimbursable. So I think Bill Lindsay is the expert who's been our financial advisor for 20 years, and he has the closest relationship with the rating agencies. And he might be better able to answer that. I'm just doing the best I can with what my knowledge is.
Okay, but we're being asked to approve two things tonight, the operating and the capital. The question is, I want to know that with the additional drawdown starting with the high school in the next 12 months, does Bill or do you feel confident that we will be able to keep our AAA rating through this process with the school? That's my question.
So noted. Any additional questions or comments from other BET members? Tom, just a clarification from me. Are we on the same required deadline by charter to set it to issue a capital budget transmittal letter today, like
Well,
we are with the operating budget?
You still need to sign it. I think we probably have a day or two leeway, but it has to be soon.
Well, if we have leeway, Mr. Chairman, if we have leeway, I would like to hear from Bill our guidance on what the answer to my question is.
Understood, Troy. Thank you. I'm trying to figure out how much leeway that is because Tom's talking about a day. I don't know that by rule, we have to give 7 days notice for another meeting for Bill to come and present to us. Do we have that flexibility from a time perspective by charter?
If I might, Chair, I mean, the charter provides that DET is required to forward the capital budget on or before April 1st of each year. So same as the operating.
Thank you, Tom. That being the case, I would ask for a vote as to who is in favor of the setting capital budget at the 70.2 million recommended here. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. 4 in favor, all opposed. 2 opposed. Abstentions. Kendrick, did you vote one way or another?
He voted in the affirmative.
I'm sorry. Thank
He
you.
voted in the affirmative.
All right, then we will go ahead and I will sign that letter. We will approve that budget. However, I will note, Tom, that I would like a special meeting on the agenda for Bill to come and address the questions raised by Mr. Jelleret and Ms. Yang, please.
And I would like to say, just as a follow-up to that vote, I mean, I have a fair degree of confidence that Henry and Tom and the finance people and Mr. Lindsay have been keeping very close track of the debt ratio and the absolute amount of debt, relative to our grand list, as well as the percentage of the debt service, as a function of our budget. So, I mean, I've been hearing about, this bumping up against this, first it was 400 million, now it's 500 million, as well as that 10% of the debt service, relative to the budget. I've been hearing about this for years, and it seems to me that the finance department has been tracking that pretty closely, and I don't think that they have dropped the ball or intend to or will, just judging by how how conscientious they've been over the years about that.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho. So noted. However, I will add to that comment saying I do tend to agree with you, but I think given where we are as a city at the moment, we need to live in a trust but verify kind of environment. Ms. Yang, you wanted to make a comment?
Yes, I would like to add that I agree with Mr. Camacho. I think that our finance department does a terrific job. But I believe that we are sitting in a very different capital spending environment with all of these schools coming online and those expenditures. I believe that we have 100 to 200 million of approved but not spent capital projects. And we've been in a rising interest rate environment. And so it would be irresponsible for us to not understand and see the numbers and verify those numbers. And, I go back to one of the criticisms that came to us as a BET, that we should have seen this residential commercial shift, because this is what happened with other cities. And I tend to agree with that. And I'd like to note, Mr. Chairman, I have been asking for this presentation on our projected debt for quite some time.
So noted, Ms. Yang, and covering the same material, we will have that presentation via special meeting, as we said. Any other items as it relates to the capital budget?
Mr. Chairman, Troy, one more thing. With regard to Ed's comments, I agree. Up to this point, I've been fifth year. The finance department is very helpful, and Tom has done a great job as well. But I have to say that the fact that we did not get this, that we were told at the beginning of this process last month that the phase-in option wasn't even something that we consider, and now here we are with, I'm looking at phase-in options all over the place. It just goes to show that sometimes, like you said, verify. We need to have that going when we're so close to the line right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. Any other comments? Let's move to the contingency tracker, please.
Yeah, no change on that. For the second month in a row, no requests for contingency. So at this point in the year, 8 months under our belt, we still have just under 600,000 remaining. So I think we're in good shape, barring any major surprises.
Thank you. Any questions related to contingency? All right, let's move then to the heart of the discussion for this evening, the upcoming fiscal year operating budget. Before we turn to comments from various members of the BET, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it to you to opening remarks on this topic.
Thank you, Mr. Abrams. Thank you to the members of the BET. Certainly, thank you to our finance department. We've been working diligently to scrub down where we can, finding additional revenue and trying to put together a budget of which we can be comfortable. First of all, we've evaluated the open positions within the city, which are significant, and I've ordered a complete hiring freeze. And I recommend that the Board of Education do the same thing. That will give us an opportunity to evaluate which positions are needed, which ones we might be able to do without, or where we might have some opportunities for consolidation of function, making sure that we try to be as responsible as possible. At the end of this fiscal year, as you know, we're going to be reconciling our budget based on our spending that we are analyzing. I believe there will be some money, some funds left over that we can carry over into the next year. And I talked to Tom Ellis today, who reached out to our consultant, Mr. Lindsay, regarding the rainy day fund. I know we're looking at taking $8 million from the rainy day fund. I've recommended that we take another $1 million, and Tom is quite comfortable that we will still be able to maintain our AAA bond rating. And the rainy day fund is called that for a reason. And if you look around, it's doing more than raining right now. We're in a tsunami, and it's something that I think might be appropriate this year to take an extra $1 million out of there. Over the past several years, using the 4th taxing district as an example, we've done what we can to keep taxes extremely low. 2018, we had a 1% increase in the fourth taxing district. 2019, a 3.9%. As you know, in 2020, we flat funded, we had a reduction. Also in 2021, 3.2%. 2022, a 0.3%. 2023, 2.6%. And 2024, 1.9% increases. So we're trying to be responsible in our funding and keeping our taxes as low as possible. We recognize the tax burden. Also, all the members of the BET and all the members of the Common Council are also taxpayers within the city of Norwalk. And we understand the pain. We understand the situation we're in. And so we want to try to move forward again, putting together a budget that we're as comfortable as possible with. And thank you to all who work so hard. We've been scrubbing the numbers and trying to get down as low as possible. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tom, do you want to take us through the final scenario that you sent us a few hours before this meeting, just for the benefit of the board, so we all have the numbers squared away?
Let me know when you can see that and if it's legible.
Yes, to both. Thank you.
Okay. So this is this middle section here is what's been updated just over the last few days based on all of our discussions. The mayor touched on a few of those. Couple of things. We did not go to the 8 million or the 9 million yet, but it will come down slightly from there. But what we also changed was the personal property rate going from 27 up to 28. That's over here on the side. And then we are expecting to pull out another 3 million from the city operating budget side. So the budget as it stands right now with the previous BET recommendations is 204 million. I'm sorry, just under 205 million. So that will come down to 202 million with these additional changes, some of which are related to the hiring freeze components that the mayor referred to.
Can you tell us these one-time sources? What can you explain those? For some reason, I don't know if we talked about these.
Yeah, so the tax sale, Lisa was originally going to have the tax sale in July, which meant that most of the funds would have come in this fiscal year in the May or June timeframe. Remember that by the time the tax sale actually happens, there aren't that many properties that go on the market. It's more of a catalyst to get people to catch up on their taxes before the actual sale. So what we did was we delayed the tax sale into September of next year so that the revenues will hit for this for fiscal 25. Also helping to offset the tax increases. And then Spinnaker is a development that our corporation council team is expecting a settlement sometime in 2005. And the Housing Authority also owes us $3 million based on negotiations that have been ongoing for some time. So we expect that in 2025 as well. But again, for any of these calculations in the out years, these one-time sources obviously are not included.
So, Tom, one follow-up question from me then on the tax sale shift in date. Is that going to affect the current fiscal year revenue projections at all? Is this a simple game of left pocket, right pocket there, or is that truly incremental revenue that we're going to see that will not have a negative impact this fiscal year?
We think the majority of it will be next year. In fact, Lisa sent out the first notification and it's already coming in. She's already getting additional payments this fiscal year. But there's still a lot of, interaction going back and forth between her department and taxpayers to resolve it. So the vast majority of it will hit in 2025.
Thank you. Additional questions regarding what has recently been presented? All right. Seeing no additional questions, what I would like to propose that we do, all of us having had an opportunity to review various scenarios, the most recent presented here, the scenarios we reviewed last Friday, which included flat budget, which included parts of the budget down 5%, etc. I'd like to have each member of the BET spend a few minutes to talk about their point of view as to where we think we are, what you would recommend to us as a board. From there, we will see if there's any coalescing around a singular idea that we can then use to base and vote on a FY25 budget. Is that acceptable to everyone? All right. That being the case, Mr. Jelleret, may I start with you, please, and your perspective?
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just like to say, this is my 5th year on the budget, than the BET, and I have to say, obviously, this is the toughest situation I've experienced. Obviously, going through the pandemic and stuff was a challenge, but this is an unexpected challenge, and I think it's a catastrophic situation, which I think is requiring tough choices. I've lived in the city for 29 years, grew up, had 2 children here, went through the schools in the city, and very happy from here. I would like to say that based on the work we did last month, going through every department, including the Board of Ed, and we were able to try to scrap. We really didn't find as what I felt was a significant enough money to try to offset these tremendous tax interests per district. And when you see numbers in the 20s and 30s, even in the double figures, it's very painful for me. So I would like to see the pain shared by both the city, the Board of Ed, and the commercial, that's all the residents of this town. And if the way I was looking at it, I felt that when you do look at, and it's not up on the screen now, I know the latest one, but the flat budget we looked at did show over a phase-in period of 4 years, did show, it's a difficult situation, but at least it does show that it's a pain absorbed by all 3 branches of the city. I think it's my fiduciary responsibility being on this board to try to preserve. When I got on this board, I said my goal was always to try to keep this as a AAA rated city. And as our capital budget, this is why I don't like separating the capital budget from the operating budget in these discussions, because they're all tied together. And if we lose our rating, and that the biggest line item we have is the debt service, and that number, within highest interest, or when you lose your AAA rating, your interest rates go to a different level, and that number is going to really spiral. So, my feeling is I would like to see the 4-year phase in, but I don't want people to be fooled because they see lower tax increases because of the 4-year phase in. I still think there's room to be done. And I asked for 5% at the last meeting we had on the department thing. But I would prefer to see a flat budget this year. Keeping in mind, by the way, that we have a lot of projects online in the city that will come on the commercial side. We all drive by them. The Y project, the Wegmans, the one across the street from the Y, the South Norwalk train station. And these will help our tax base and help the commercial side. So as we roll into the next evaluation, which will be in 5 years, I think it will soften the blow. So that's my position. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jelleret. I'm just going as order as I see people on my screen. Mr. Kasimis.
Thank you, Ed. I think we all know we're all taxpayers. We all live here. We work here. We shop here. We play here. And, from my side, a pastor, we do a lot of outreach community. We did that big Easter egg hunt just at the Green. We love the city, and we want to do what's best for the city. And I know the entire community has been emailing us. We're listening, but we got a difficult decision to make. We got to do what's best for everybody. me, I'm on a pastor's salary now. I used to be in corporate. I was in corporate for many years. 10 of those years, I was a director for a big pharmaceutical company. I had millions and millions of dollars in my budget. But when the vice president says you got to cut your budget, you cut your budget. You don't say I can't. It's not doable. You cut your budget or you're fired. And you live with it. And you cut where you can, that it doesn't affect your business unit and your operations. Now being a pastor, where our church is, I get calls constantly for people who are homeless. People need money to pay their rent. Everybody's got challenges. It's a very tough year, and we have to be very careful with what we do because, honestly, an increase in my taxes, I've cut as far as I can in my house, and my wife works full time as well. And for my tax to go up, I'm going to have to go find it somewhere. I don't know where. I haven't gotten there yet. Hopefully. One of the points I want to make is, I was a Board of Ed member for many years, 6.5 years. And the first year that I was on there was a $4 million deficit. We had to cut $4 million out of the budget. And we spent all night till 1:30 in the morning. I'll never forget it. And we went line by line by line, and we found items that we could cut. I don't think we laid anybody off, but we found some extra things, and we did it. And then the next year we were $2 million in the black. I went over the Board of Ed budget. Again, it's because what I know. This is strictly my opinion because I was on the Board of Ed. I'm familiar with it. The last time I was on the Board of Ed was 2017. And in the last 7 years, the Board of Ed budget has gone up over $60 million. It's a lot of money. That's about $9+ million a year. And I understand contractual increases, but the number of students has stayed the same for the last 7 years ago. And next year they project the same amount of students. So that's a lot of money, $60 million for the same amount of students. I've asked several questions from the Board of Ed. Unfortunately, I didn't get the right answers. Not the answer I was looking for, but I just didn't think they answered the question properly. I'll give you an example. I looked at central office administration. In 2020, they said they had 18 certified administrators. Today, three years later, they have 32. I think they need less, not more there. In comparison to paraprofessional teacher assistants in the classroom in 2020, they had 197. Today, they have 130. So I think they need more. They are not less. I think there's some things that they can do to change that. When I ask about the $7 million in other professional services, the answer is vague. It's just professional services. There's no detail in that line item. Now, when I go to the city side, there's services that we can't do without as a city. Like I said, my church is trying to provide services to people who come off the street or need help. The city needs to function. The city provides a lot of services to the citizens. And two of those is fire and police. We can't cut those off, those departments. We need them. There are certain departments, a blank reduction across the board. I don't think it works. Every department is different. Some departments can afford to cut. Some others can't. When it comes to the phase-in, I think it's a no-win situation, whether you phase it in or you do hit it all at once. I don't think there's no way you can win on this. But I hope most of us saw what Alex Knopp wrote. Maybe a phase-in will give the legislative ideas that Alex Knopp had put out, maybe give it a chance to work, and if that's the case, we can change the phase-in. I just don't like kicking the can down the road. Phasing it in kicks it down the road, the debt. It's no guarantee that the budget's going to stay what we said it's going to stay. Could change. So that's where I'm at. The debt service, of course, we've talked about. It's a major concern to me. I don't think it's sustainable. I think we have to keep an eye on it. But I know Tom Ellis and everybody else is doing a good job keeping an eye on it. They have a great track record. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Mr. Kasimis. Mr. Constant.
Alrighty. All right, so I believe it's crucial to address some key points that were raised by fellow residents. One being the significant increase in taxes resulting from the reval process, particularly impacting residential properties in Norwalk. This could force many residents to consider relocating, which is distressing for our community. While I feel a temporary fix, such as a 4-year phase-in plan for budget adjustments may alleviate immediate concerns, it's essential to consider the potential long-term repercussions. Cutting necessary resources could ultimately lead to more costly repairs or inefficiencies down the line, exacerbating the challenges faced by residents. Additionally, I'm troubled by the disparity in taxation between commercial apartment buildings and residential properties. Unlike commercial business buildings, apartment complexes generate revenue from occupants, yet they're not being taxed equitably. This imbalance not only affects the affordability of housing in Norwalk, but also raises questions about the community's priorities. Therefore, I'm voting in favor of a 4% increase for the Board of Ed and a flat budget for the city. I feel education is a backbone of any great city, and investing in our public schools is crucial for the future of Norwalk. I recognize the efforts of our city workers whose contributions are immeasurable. However, we have to consider the long-lasting consequences of our decisions today. With the reval increasing the tax burden, it's essential for parents to afford to live in Norwalk and have their children attend the public schools without facing significant budget increases, excuse me. I believe in meeting students where they're at and providing them the resources necessary to succeed. Our decisions today impact the future of the children in Norwalk, and it's our responsibility to ensure that they have the same opportunities that we had. City departments should prioritize efficiency during these challenging times. While a flat budget isn't an every year occurrence, during these difficult times, we should look for ways to be more efficient and streamline operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Ms. Yang? Ms. Yang, I'm sorry, you're still on mute.
I was saying I wrote my comments, which I will read. First, I would like to thank the public for everyone's thoughtful and recent comments. I have read every single one and taken all of the comments to heart. There were a few that were critical of this board and management of the city, and I would like to say, in many respects, you were right. We should have been much more prepared and prescient to see and find the right course of action. We need to do better, especially in the area of our looming debt burden with all the capital expenditures that are planned. First, I'd like to begin with the basic premise that there are 3 legs to this stool. Troy has mentioned this as well. The first is residential, the second is commercial properties, and the third is city and Board of Education spending. If we pass this budget with no phase-in and a 4% increase in the budget, the residents bear 100% of the problem. If we pass this budget and add the phase-in, commercial will bear some of the issue. If we pass a flat expense budget, then the city and Board of Education will bear some of the pain as well. We have a big problem, and every leg of the stool must support each other. So 2 topics to discuss, the assessment phase-in and the operating budget. I'm going to address the easier one, I think, first, which is the assessment phase-in. And I will probably go into more detail than some of my colleagues since I have analyzed this idea in great detail. We have an unprecedented mix shift in our grand list between commercial and residential. This leads in aggregate to residential taxes being up more than 10% and commercial taxes being down, potentially being down 10%. This is a huge shift. Fortunately, there is Connecticut Statute Section 12-62C entitled Municipal Option to Phase in Assessment Increases Resulting from Revaluation of Real Property. This statute has been on the books since 1987 for precisely the scenario we are facing today. Stamford, Waterbury, New Haven are among the cities who, when faced with the same dilemma last year because they had their revaluation 1 year earlier, took the phase-in option. The city of Norwalk had a 2-year phase-in option in the 2003-2004 timeframe. So we've done it before. And as already discussed, as we read in Nancy on Norwalk, former Mayor Alex Knopp has some interesting ideas, and he recommends taking the phase-in not from 4 years, but to 6 years, meaning the longer, the better, because that gives us the option to see a more normalized commercial residential mix. So doing the phase-in accomplishes a gradual shift in the commercial residential mix with a similar outcome to having separate commercial and residential mill rates, which many people in the comments had suggested. Here are some of the pros. It eases the pain of the assessment increase in year one. Many people may have to borrow from their home equity loan, credit cards, extensions to pay their extra taxes. It will also give you time to decide if you can afford to live in Norwalk and need to sell. You won't be selling under the financial duress of a 20 to 35% tax increase. Second, a 4-year phase-in leads gross dollar savings over the 4-year period on the order of, in Tom Ellis's number, anywhere from 1.6 to 7.7%. These are real dollars and cumulatively are significant. If we take District 1 as an example and a 4% budget increase, the aggregate taxes paid by the homeowner is $30,868 with the phase-in versus $33,006 with no phase-in, a savings of $2,138 or 6.5%. This is real money and real savings that we can accomplish by implementing the phase-in. Further, the prospect of significant future tax increases that's built into the phase-in will hold City Hall and the Board of Education and this board on a tighter budgetary check going forward. Also, the new construction that we see today will make its way onto the ground list, further easing the increases over this period of time. A 4-year phase-in is a bridge to year 5 where we do another revaluation and hopefully the mix goes back to historical levels. Without the phase-in, we are essentially locking in tax rates at the bottom of the commercial market for the next 5 years. The phase-in may allow homeowners to stay within their SALT, $10,000 SALT exemption, whereas to stay within this exemption longer, whereas if we do it all at once, you may be past SALT and part of your property taxes are not tax deductible. And the commercial owners, on the other hand, can write off 100% of their property taxes. So what are the cons? This will require work and careful attention to the assessment calculations and the billings. And this is City Hall's job, and they must execute this flawlessly. 2, we have to make sure that there is no double dipping where certain properties have commercial enterprise tax exemptions and they don't also get the exemption from the phase-in. It's a complicated calculation and there will be outliers that may not make sense, but in aggregate, this math works and is more favorable to the homeowner. I would just like to make a personal note. I'm a math person. I went to MIT. I have a master's in mechanical engineering. I have an MBA from Wharton, and I spent the last 30 years in finance. I was a managing director in mergers and acquisitions at Goldman Sachs. So I'm used to looking at these numbers and trying to assess whether or not they work. This is something that the state has provided us. And I think, and this works, the number works, and it's favorable to everyone rather than seeing a sharp tax increase. Time value of money. On the budget, I am advocating for a flat expense budget for the city and Board of Education. Having gone through the budget and listening to residents, there are many more ways the city and the Board of Education can cut non-essential services. A flat expense budget is 17 million out of 440 million, a 4% increase. We can find this. I personally can name off quite a few, and in our comments, there was a myriad of ideas that came up. Additionally, we need to prepare for additional borrowings under our planned capital projects. We will be bumping against our ratings limits, and we need to show the agencies that we have fiscal discipline. Going into some of the numbers, I'd like to give you some round numbers to put things in context. We have 91,000 residents. There are roughly 30,000 tax-paying properties, and we have under 12,000 students. Fully loaded, 60% of our annual budget goes to the school, and we spend roughly $30,000 per student. We are investing in our young people more than we ever have. We have to spend that money wisely and strive to push it down to the direct educational level. To me, asking someone to spend another $400 a year in more taxes is real money. People sort of say, oh, it's real money, because every individual is going to have to find $400 out of their own budget to sacrifice to pay for more money for the city. And if the city wants us to find, it's the taxpayer to find money, the city needs to find money as well. Finally, I'd like to point out that we received over 30 detailed and thoughtful emails, some of them several pages outlining how we can improve our budget process and where we can make cuts, and verbal comments at the public hearing. We received over 75 emails from the Board of Education advocates today. And finally, a petition went out over the weekend asking us to pass a flat expense budget. And within 48 hours, 500 people signed that petition. And the current count, given the email that Lisa Brinton sent us, is now well over 800. And this is within 48, 60 hours. So as a board, we need to listen. Having been a resident here for over 30 years, I don't think I've ever seen the residents more activated on this issue. To many, it's not just 4%. It's a decision as to whether or not they can continue to afford to live in Norwalk. We have heard that again and again. And that's a big change that we may be forcing people to make. So as a city, we can and must help by using the dollars given more efficiently and wisely and prudently, and trying to tighten our belts and keep the expenses flat.
Thank you, Ms. Yang. Mr. Camacho.
Okay. So first of all, I think that when we talk about the Board of Education, we're not talking about a sort of a monolith, like one chunk of thing. What we're talking about is a compilation of children, of students. And that number grows and contracts. And my understanding is that the demographers, as recently as this past November or December, have had to adjust their projections for the student population for next year up 416 students from when the budget was originally submitted. So we have 416 additional students as we speak, and that number is fluid. And we're talking about a Board of Education that I think all of the parents in Norwalk increasingly are enthusiastic about. And I think that we have people who are moving into Norwalk and people who are postponing moving out of Norwalk, because the Norwalk school system has shown a great deal of promise over the last couple of years. So I think that now is the exact worst time to flat fund the Board of Education. Ms. Yang, you spoke about $400 per year on average, which on average, that's what it's going to mean for homeowners, for the median homeowners. That's going to be the, more or less the most that people are going to see, between $400 and $500 per year for that median home. That's about $40+ dollars a month. I can assure you that the vast majority of parents of these children that we're educating in the city are going to be more than happy, but not happy, but certainly will be compelled to pay that $400 increase for the sake of their children. And that's about $40 a month. And we're asking to flat fund a Board of Education that is on the verge of, I think, achieving great things in this state. We're asking to flat fund them as an alternative to paying each of us about $40 a month more. In a situation where the student population is apparently increasing. So it seems to me that, yes, everyone's taxes are going to go up. That's inevitable. And it happened because as a result of COVID, commercial properties have lost value, and residential properties in Norwalk, because Norwalk has become an attractive city. The residential values have gone up. That is the reason that we are in the situation that we're in right now. And I think if we do the 4-year phase-in, we're really asking people, at least in year one, to pay $40 to $50 a month in taxes more to maintain the level of service that we have, and to maintain the progress that the Board of Education has embarked on and is engaged in with a student population that is increasing. I don't think that's a lot to ask. And I think it gives us time to reevaluate and reassess for next year, to find more dollars, or to perhaps cut in places where we can cut, streamline the operations where possible. It gives us a year to figure out how to make the tax increase next year less than the projections are current. And so we're asking the city of Norwalk to pay $40 a month, the median homeowner, $40 a month more, for the sake of the children and for the sake of the services that the city of Norwalk provides. And I think that the cost, the pain that we are about to inflict if we decide to vote, number one, against the 4-year phase-in, and number two, to flat fund everyone, the pain that that's going to cause has to be weighed against $400 a year, or under 40, or maybe around $50 a month at most in taxes. So we're all in this together, and I think, unfortunately, people's taxes are going to go up. That's inevitable. But it seems to me that to maintain the level of service that we have, both on the city side and the education side, when we have a situation that was created in part by COVID, or in large part by COVID, and in part because the city of Norwalk has become so attractive that people are moving here and residential values are increasing, to ask for that level of pain, to inflict that level of pain for $40 or $50 a month more, seems to be a bit excessive. And so I'm going to vote for the budget as proposed. I think the hiring freeze is a good idea. That's going to save us about $2-something million, at least until January, until we can figure out what we're going to do next year. And I think that dipping into the rainy day fund to the tune of another $1 million is not going to adversely impact our AAA rating. And I think what we need is time. And I think the budget as proposed, with a hiring freeze and with the additional million from the rainy day fund, I think that will serve that purpose. And so I'm going to vote for the budget as proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho. Thank you to all of my fellow board members for very thoughtful remarks, and being very thoughtful throughout this entire process. I will state the obvious. There is no easy answer here. That said, I will also state that I am tired of the let's give it time argument that we continue to make. We used that argument last year. We used that argument the year prior. And as a city, all of us as a board, our elected officials, the Common Council, continue to act as if nothing needs to change year in and year out. The reality is we are at a pivot point for the citizens of Norwalk. It's not easy. It's not a comfortable pivot point. There have been comments made that keeping budgets flat will cost people their jobs. I take that very, very seriously. I also, though, look at what has happened in the last basically 72 hours, where the city has come up with $4.7 million. And in that $4.7 million, I don't see any reductions in staff. I'm not sure that any reductions beyond flat make any sense whatsoever. That truly would inflict significant pain on all parties, most importantly, the citizens of Norwalk, who would see drastic reductions in service and in the quality of education. But I'm also not convinced that even a partial increase, call it the 2.5% that the city is proposing and challenging the Board of Education to meet something similar, elicits the right type of behavioral change in really looking at how and where we spend every dollar to address the needs of the city going forward. The 4-year phase-in makes sense. There's no question that that is something that not only makes it easier to bear, but produces real, true savings over that period of time for the taxpayers of Norwalk. That to me seems like the easiest check mark to make as a board. The challenge, though, is can we live with a flat budget, understanding based on contractual commitments and other things that there will be material impacts to the services that we provide, both within education and across the city. My point of view is I think it's time to force that issue. I think it's time to see what breaks. Some of us live in the corporate world. Some of us have been in that environment many times where you are told by stockholders, by leadership, by whomever, that this is the expense budget you can run in. And it forces a level of creativity that maybe didn't exist before. So again, there's no good answer here. No matter what we do, not everyone is going to be happy at all. But repeating the past is no way to drive to the future of this city. So I am going to suggest that we start the year with a flat budget and seeing along the way what happens and what breaks, and we deal with the consequences as we need to going into the following fiscal year. Again, not easy, not anything any of us want to do, but we are at a point where drastic changes need to be made. So with all of the comments, I am going to ask that we split our voting into two aspects of things. First, I will ask for a vote on the operating budget overall. And then I will ask for a separate vote on the 4-year phasing of that of the overall situation.
May I
And
ask
perhaps, go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, may I ask a quick question? What does, so the flat budget, what tax increase will that result in? Because that's going to result in a tax increase, I said, as well, because of the shifting of the.
Yeah,
That's
if you'll give me, that was the material that was presented last Thursday.
Yeah,
I just need to switch screens for a moment, and I
I
can tell
just
you
want to make
that.
sure that we know that what we're voting on here, either
Yep.
the $500, the $400 tax increase, or what?
Yep. Just bear with me for one moment while I find it, please. I've just got too many different screens open. A flat budget, if I am reading everything correctly, will result in year one of a tax increase in the first taxing district of $235 or 3.9%. In the second taxing district, $319 or 5.6%. In the third taxing district, $192 or 2.5%. In the fourth taxing district, an actual decrease of $6 for minus 0.08%. In the fifth taxing district, a decrease of $168 for a decline of 1.8%. And a decrease in the sixth taxing district of $146 or 0.8%.
And that's doing a 4-year, and that's doing a 4-year phase-in?
That's doing a 4-year phase-in.
So we're saving $100 by doing a flat. For instance, in the first taxing district, we'd be saving $100 or $100
Actually, we're saving $200.
$200
on average, $200 per taxing district.
So that's what we're going to be voting on. We're going to be voting on $200 per year tax increase. The difference between a flat fund, between a flat funding, the city and the Board of Ed, and the voting on the budget as proposed. It's $200 per district.
On average, correct. However, that I do want to state though that difference I am giving you is compared to the numbers that were presented tonight, which is a 2.39% increase on the city side and a 4% on the Board of Education side of things.
Exactly. So that's not much of a difference. Not much of a difference at all. And the pain that we're going to be inflicting is, and the thing is, let's wait until it to see if it breaks. I don't think that's a very good strategy, honestly, because for $200, we don't need to take that risk.
If I may, can you have Tom Ellis give us the numbers right now? Because I believe we're at 3.5 for the BOE and 2.39 for the city side as this is presented in the center column. So it's not 4% and 3% or 4% and 4%.
No, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. The numbers that were presented earlier today and earlier in this meeting would be the city side at 2.39% and the Board of Education at 4%.
No, at 3.5.
And I would also indicate that once we set the budget and the tax levy, to say let's flat fund and see what breaks, I think is not a responsible thing to say, because that revenue stream will be our revenue stream. And when we start to see the contractual obligations that we're under, we're not going to be able to find the money for a lot of these contractual obligations. As I said, we scrubbed the budget. We came down several $1 million trying to find a way that we can keep the taxes low. And we took if you recall, and I know it was a little extreme, the Board of Education originally asked for 8.2%. We brought it down to 4.5 and 4, and now we're down at 3.5. But this is going to be our revenue stream. So there's no more revenue coming in once we set the tax levy. And I predict there will be requests for special appropriations and other things as we move forward in the budget year. I do want to say that the department heads in the past years have done a remarkable job of keeping within their budget. This year will probably be different because, as I said, keeping them flat funded does not even begin to cover the contractual obligations. But whatever happens in this vote, we will have to live with, and we'll have to do the best we can. But I'm thinking that you're going to see some extreme challenges and extreme requests, a lot of requests for special appropriations as we move down the road.
And that's for a tax savings of about $200.
Again, it varies by district, but on
200
average, yes.
plus, 200, plus or minus. It seems to me that we're running around, with our hair on fire, but it's to some extent, it's not really, that's not the reality that we're facing. What we're facing is a tax increase, and the difference between flat funding and what the city is now proposing, which is very modest, is really not that much money a year. $200 a year.
Some people, $200 a year is 2 months worth of food on the table.
I understand that. I understand that, but for I think the significant majority of people, $200 a year in exchange for the services that we get and the Board of Education, educating our kids at the level that we've expected or that we've come to expect. I think for many people, I would say majority of people, that is something that the taxes increase every year anyway. I mean, they don't stay stagnant. So they increase every year. I think people expect that. I think $200 a year is not out of what people would expect in any event.
With all due respect, Mr. Camacho, every year we go to these numbers and it's the same thing. It's only another $100. It's only another $400. And unfortunately, it's all been cumulative to the point where there are people, I don't feel comfortable putting numbers in, and maybe this is the start of a trend where people are forced to make the decision between groceries or paying their taxes or staying or leaving in Norwalk. We have a lot of seniors who lived on fixed income and Social Security. So every dollar, I think, makes a difference. And, we have to start somewhere. We have to start to show some fiscal discipline, especially given where we're going to go with our borrowings.
And we're showing it by proposing a budget for the Board of Ed of 3.5 and for the city of 2 point whatever it was.
Hang on, the budget for the Board of Ed right now is at 4%.
4%, Ed.
No, we projected 3.5. If you look down there, is that correct, Tom Ellis?
No, these the mill rate adjustments are indicative of a 4%. We didn't touch that.
Yeah, we're looking at
3.5 down here.
We're looking at 4% and 2.39, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we talked today and we were talking 3.5 for the Board of Ed.
Well, I'm telling you what we're looking at.
I think he's speaking to Tom.
Yeah.
Also,
so look,
people are found they have to tighten their belts a little bit. I think people will use the dollars that they are given more efficiently, and we may end up with a better, superior product at the end of the day.
Mr. Abrams, can I get some clarity around how we're voting? Is it, are we voting on the operating budget and the phase-ins or BOE and city budget separately?
It is a singular operating budget. The BOE component and the city components are within it. We have not yet decided if we are going to propose a flat budget or if we are going to propose something other than flat. Either the recommendation that came in late today of 2.39 on the city side and 4% on the Board of Ed, or if we want to do something else. I take into account Mr. Camacho's comments, right? Again, not so much from a dollar figure perspective, because we can all make numbers dance, but from the perspective of, are we going to do damage to the level of services we provide, both on the city side and on the education side? It's a very valid argument for a relatively small difference in the two options.
Mr.
That-
Abrams, I think what we have to do is, because listening to the BET members speaking, making their comments, I don't think we have consensus in any one direction. So I think in order to vote, we're going to have to put something out on the floor. Somebody's going to have to make a motion to make a vote.
I'm getting there, Mr. Mayor.
We're still in discussion.
Because I'd like to get something that we have some general agreement on.
Mr.
Right.
Chairman,
And-
this is Troy real quick.
Yes,
I just wanted to clarify something that you said, and I think Ed or the mayor followed up on. You said we just set it and see how things go. No. That's not.
No.
I don't think that's what you meant.
No,
I
I'll
think you meant
retract that statement.
if we set it, however we set it, it's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And people have to live within it.
Yeah. Better stated. My comment stands as retracted. Look, I'd like to propose one other idea to this board for reaction. And that is, again, in the spirit of forcing some creativity on the various aspects of the city. With some very, very aggressive thinking in the last 72 hours, the city was creative and was able to take a 3.91% increase down to 2.39%. We could, if this board is willing to entertain this as an idea, suggest that the Board of Education budget be set at a 2.5% increase, which would be roughly $232.3 million versus their $235.6 million 4% increase, or a decrease of roughly $3.3 million. Again, leaves room for addressing some of the contractually committed increases that they have to pay to keep staff on hand, but forces them to think a bit more creatively about what they do within the rest of their budget, just like the city was able to do in the last 72 hours. Any reaction to that as a proposal before we bring it to a vote? Artie?
No,
So
I
Mr.
agree with you.
Oh,
I think there needs to be some sense of compromise. And I appreciate what the city did today. And I'll go back to the BOE again, because I know the numbers been there. I think they could do better. I think there's a lack of transparency on some of the items that they've listed in their budget. And I think they need to cut in some places. And I think your proposal is a lot better for me. I don't agree with a flat fund because we can't cancel some of the city services, nor the Board of Ed. They do need increases, and we have to come to a compromise.
I have a comment. I feel like
Go
it's
ahead, Con.
I feel like it's unfair to compare the Board of Ed to the city because it's not apples and oranges. One is for the quality of the education provided to students, not for profit, not for operations, not for business. We're talking about the students. I believe Mr. Camacho said that before, and I'm echoing it. We're talking about the quality of education provided to students, not a number.
I appreciate that, Kendrick. I am just suggesting that if you look at the data we have and the transparency that is and is not within that budget, there are a lot of things that can be done for the quality of our students with $232 million.
And I propose that we, rather than that we, I think you suggested 3%.
I suggested 2.39 for the city and
Yeah,
2.5% for the Board of Education.
So why not 2.39 for both, Ed?
So I would recommend 3% for the Board of Ed, 2.39. And we're talking about, rather than a difference of $200 a month for the median taxpayer, probably a difference of $180 a month. It's, or maybe 170, I'm sorry, a year, $175 a year. I think that, it's, we really are, it's nickels and dimes at this point, in that sense. But because we're talking about a tax increase of now perhaps $175 a year. So I think 3% is paying for the Board of Ed, 2.39 is quite a bit of paying for the cities. And I think the taxpayers are expect a tax increase of some sort here. It's been pretty low over the past 10 years, and this year will be a bit higher, but it's still, I think, within the realm of what's reasonable and what's expected.
I should also comment, we all know that property tax levies, it's the most regressive tax. It's a terrible, terrible way to have to gain revenue. We also talk about running the city like a business. Well, businesses are driven by the bottom line. And budgeting is not an exact science. You anticipate your revenue, you anticipate your expenditures, and in the public sector, it's usually you want to make them break even so that you're not making money, obviously. But we need to look at that as well, because once we set this tax levy, there is no other revenue coming in. If you're in the business, you get your budget going, and in the middle of the budget stream, you can increase taxes, you can do other things where you can gain greater revenue. But we have no way to get more revenue once we set this tax levy. So if we're flat funded, or if we fund to a lower level that we can, that is reasonable, then we will find that people there, as I mentioned, there will be coming back for a lot of special appropriations, because the department heads and perhaps the Board of Ed will not be able to meet their expenditures and their contractual obligations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 1 second, Ms. Yang. Just, Mr. Jelleret, to get back to your question, why I threw out 2.5% versus a match 2.39 was simply because the city benefits are a little bit more from some of the revenue that we would secure from Spinnaker, from the tax sale, et cetera. And it was simply a round number, if you would, at 2.5% as a proposal. Just to clarify how I got to that number.
I appreciate
Ms.
that.
Yang.
I appreciate that explanation, but although flat is where obviously I would like to start, I could see at least 2.39 for both. I could feel comfortable with that. I think that will spread the pain across the city, as we've been talking about all evening, and you are absolutely right, Ed. In 24 hours, the city went from 4% to 2.39. So I think the Board of Ed might be able to do the same. Thank you.
Ms.
Let's
Yang?
remember that the city went to 2.39 in part with a hiring freeze, which department heads are apparently not at this point, and they're going to be doing without. And that's at least until the beginning of the year, I assume. But it's not as if they found money, as they decided not to. That we're not.
No, it's freezing open headcount. You're absolutely right. That's a part of it. Ms. Yang?
I would like to suggest that we can set the overall budget at 2.39, 2.3%, but we set the budgets for the various departments or the increases the operating budget at 2%. And we take that 0.4% with the city and we put it in a contingency fund. And we will be able to then approve things along the way that, perhaps need to be added or not added. And if we have money left over, we can pay down debt.
It
I
doesn't work.
appreciate the creativity. I don't think it's tenable to try and run a city and run budgets that way. You have to give the departments a budget and let them manage to it and not know that there is contingency or extra money to come running for all of the time.
Yeah. And
Mr.
plus,
Camacho?
if you put it in contingency, it's still the same. You're still talking about the same absolute budget amount, right? It's still in the budget. It's just in a different place. But so yeah, so I I think that we're really just at this point we're just throwing numbers up. They really don't mean anything.
Right.
I mean, we've to this point, we pared the budget down really carefully at the meetings that we had for the open items. We pared that down, and ever since then we've been talking about just numbers willy nilly without. I mean, we do have new numbers now from Tom, but even this discussion about let's do 2.5 or 2.39 for both sides, we have no idea what that means. We have no idea if that's at the end of the day, if it's the difference between $150 a year in taxes or 175, we don't know. It seems to me that what the city has proposed so far, which is to take a pretty big hit, maybe the proposal to reduce the Board of Ed by 1% to 3%, that's a hit, and it's kind of commensurate with the city side hit. But I think if we go much beyond that, we really are doing a great disservice to the city for this year and perhaps, damage for years to come. I don't know. But once again, I just keep reminding people we're talking about 175 to $200 a year.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Jelleret.
Can I just respond to what Ed just said? We just voted, Ed, to approve the capital budget with numbers we're not certain about, and the numbers are pretty big. So I'm a little confused at why you're saying now.
Because I'm pretty certain about
we are not just throwing numbers around. We've been doing this for the last month.
The finance department.
We've been looking at all the numbers very
Gentlemen,
closely.
I'm pretty certain that
can you respond, Ed? Ed,
I'm pretty
please,
certain that
let Mr. Jelleret finish his comments, and then I'll allow you to respond, please.
Thank you, Mr.
Talking
Chairman.
over one another doesn't help.
Yeah, I just find that kind of odd because, that the capital budget is a very large numbers there. And I think we've been working on this for the last month, as you know, and we are all pretty familiar with the numbers. And I think the fact that we are looking maybe I see some movement, obviously, from flat to where we are saying now. And I think that's, I'm willing to be flexible to go from flat up to a 2.39 level as the same as the city. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Camacho, your response.
I mean, you've been on the BOE for a number of years now. We've heard the presentation year in, year out from the finance department about the capital budgets. And so it would be very surprising to me if all of a sudden, after all that they have told us over the years, they decided to present a capital budget that jeopardized our AAA rating. That would be very surprising to me. It would be inconsistent with what they have shown us over the years. So number one, so we do know what we voted on for the capital budget. We have a pretty good sense of that. We're not in the finance department, so we don't know the intricacies of all the numbers and stuff like that. We aren't supposed to, but the staff side is I have a pretty good deal of confidence on the staff of the finance department staff, and I'm confident that the capital budget that we voted on is appropriate and doable. With respect to this, all I am saying is that we were pretty careful and meticulous up until we voted on the last open item, and ever since then we've been all over the place. And it seems to me that we started with this notion that everyone's going to pay this huge. There's going to be this huge tax increase. We began with that because there was not going to be a phase-in. and the budget was 4% and the 3.9%. We've come down to a point where I don't believe we're talking about a bigger tax increase, at least for year one, than we have agreed to, we have proposed every single year that I've been on the BET. Every single year there's been a tax increase, every single year. And I don't believe that this tax increase, in terms of the dollars that we're talking about, as proposed, with the 2.39 from the city or the 4% for the Board of Ed, maybe we go down to 3.5 or 3. I don't believe that that tax increase that's going to result is any bigger than any tax increase that we've ever had. So I think the city has done a great job in taking what could have been a disaster, at least in year one. I'm not talking about years 2 or 3, but taking what could have been a big disaster in year one, and I think made it so that it's kind of reasonable. So it seems to me that that's a pretty good result.
Thank you. I don't disagree, Mr. Camacho. However, I will say that the level of creativity and problem solving we have seen, which I applaud just as you do, has been driven by the hard questions and challenges that we have put upon the city and the Board of Education, right, through this process. Let us not discount that. If we had started where we did, we're back at 26, 32% 1 year increases. The point of this board is to continue to put pressure on things to drive creative problem solving. We've discussed a number of different things. At this point, I would like to make a motion that we approve an operating budget that includes a 2.39% increase for the city of Norwalk, which would take that budget, if I've done my calculations right, to $201.8 million, and a 3% increase to the Board of Education spending, which would take that number to $233.4 million. May I get a second to that motion?
I can second that motion.
All in favor? Signify by saying aye.
Can we take a roll call vote, Mr. Chairman?
We can certainly take a roll call vote. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll on a vote like that, please?
Mayor Rilling,
Yes.
Mr. Abrams,
Yes.
Mr. Camacho,
Yes.
Mr. Constant,
Here.
Now you need to vote yes or no on this one, Kendra.
My apologies. Yes.
Mr. Gilloret,
No.
Mr. Casimis,
Yes.
Miss Yang,
No.
so the yeas, it's 5-2 for yes, in favor of yes.
So the motion carries.
Yes.
That is where we will set an operating budget for the coming fiscal year. I appreciate the tension. I appreciate the disagreement. I appreciate the fact that we are not unanimous.
I think you also mentioned we would take a vote as the phase-in versus non-phase-in.
I'm getting to that one next, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I just want to acknowledge the fact on this first one that while we're not in agreement, the discussion has been professional, has been honest and open. So thank you for that. The next motion I would like to make is that we adopt a 4-year phase-in for the revaluation, helping to mitigate the tax increases over that period. May I get a second, please?
I'll second.
I second it, Troy.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can we do another roll call vote on this, please?
Absolutely. Mayor Rilling,
Yes.
Mr. Abrams,
Yes.
Mr. Camacho,
Yes.
Mr. Constant,
Yes.
Mr. Gilloret,
Yes.
Mr. Casimis,
Yes.
Miss Yang,
Yes.
It's unanimous, 7, the motion carries.
Thank you very much. I wish this was easier. I wish this was simple and straightforward. However, we've got an operating budget that we and the Board of Education can now work within. I would implore everyone to continue to challenge themselves and be creative in solving for this budget. I'd also like to point out that, again, in the models we looked at, that 4-year phasing sets you up for small increases going forward in both city and Board of Education budgets. We need to hold ourselves accountable to those numbers as we go forward. With that, any closing comments from any members of the Board of Education or the Board of Estimate and Tax on this topic? Mr. Cassini.
Ed, I just want to say thank you for guiding us through it. I know this is a difficult thing for all of us, so thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to
Commensurate with the
second
pay,
that.
I guess.
Ed,
Go
I'd
ahead.
like to second that. Not easy, but we made it through so far.
Okay.
And
Thank you all.
I agree as well. And I also like to thank the members of the public who have weighed in on this commentary as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mr. Mayor, any closing remarks from you?
As I've said all along, this has been a very grueling process, not easy. Budgeting is not an exact science. I know that people on the Board of Estimate and Taxation have listened to the constituents, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the hard work of Tom Ellis and Agnes Kawai and the other members of the team. Thanks to Henry to be available for his perspective on various things. And we'll see what happens. We'll get through it. We always do. We always seem to fare rather well, and I don't expect this to be any different than we have in the past. I will ensure that our department heads live within their budget, except if there's any emergency, unforeseen circumstances. And I anticipate that they will. And as I mentioned before, I have ordered an immediate hiring freeze, and I would ask the Board of Education to consider the same. To find the necessary staffing, it will give us an opportunity to try to eliminate positions that perhaps have been vacant for a period of time, thereby showing that maybe we don't need those positions, and other opportunities to find some job consolidations where we may be able to combine function. So again, thank you to everybody for their hard work, dedication, and really their commitment to the citizens of Norwalk, and making sure that we try to give them as much as we possibly can without taking as much as we possibly can. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we close, I would like, okay, Artie, you raised
No,
your
I was
hand.
going to
Go
do a
ahead.
motion to adjourn. I'm good.
Oh, hang on. Before we do that, I really would like to call out Tom Ellis and Agnes Kawai. You two have worked tirelessly. I can see it in your eyes, Tom. I know you've been spending 65, 70, 80 hours a week on this. And on behalf of the entire Board of Estimate and Tax, I want to thank both you, Agnes, and the rest of your team for the thankless work that you have been through in helping us get to conclusions here.
I would, sorry, no, it's a team effort, not just Agnes and I, but I've gotten 0 ounces of grief from any of the department heads or division chiefs every time I've gone back to ask them to meet a specific target. And, it's been, in some cases, as many as 4 times. So there's been a lot of cooperation on the other side. They don't, sometimes it's kill the messenger, but not always. So we always try to engage others to help us get the cuts. What you don't want to do is surprise people and have them find out when the budget book comes out in August or whatever. So I think it's been a good but painful interactive effort. So I'd like to spread some of that thanks out to the rest of the folks in City Hall who've been very supportive thus far.
I'd also like to give a shout out to Tom Livingston, who has put in hours and hours and hours of work as well. And he has a tremendous insight into the budget process, and it was very helpful to have him as well. So I didn't want to leave him out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. With that, may I get a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to
Thank you,
adjourn.
Artie. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a nice evening.
Thanks, Ed.